Hello and welcome to Britpops React. Today we have something a little different for you from one of our subscribers and patrons, James Hawkins, retired Apache helicopter pilot. James has been a supporter of our YouTube channel for a long time, and when we released the video on the A-10 Warthog, James posted a comment. In the comment, James mentioned that he was a retired AH-64 Apache pilot, and as we were looking to record a video on that soon, we reached out to James and asked if he would be kind enough to record a small intro video. Being an ex-military man and used to receiving interesting missions, he took up the challenge and sent us the following video with his interesting insights on what it's really like to fly an Apache. So let's meet James. He's the chap in the top right of the photo. I believe this was taken in 1998. Over to you, James.
Hi, my name is James Hawkins, and a lot of my friends just call me Hawk. I've been asked to say a few words about what it's like to fly an Apache helicopter. I was in the Army from 1973 to 1976. I was actually in Special Forces on an A-team. I did light weapons and demolitions as my specialty. Then I got out of the Army for a while, decided to go back in and go to Warrant Officer Flight School. After that, I transitioned into the Cobra helicopter, attack helicopter, and also the Apache AH-64 Apache helicopter. So later on, I retired after 20 years and had some great experiences. Thought I would share some of these with you. And just to preface this is on the AH-64 Alpha. This is one of the first, or the first model actually, that came out that was put into service. They've made a lot of variations since then, and the modern day Apache is quite different and even much more effective. Though I think you'll find the A model was, the Alpha model was great, just a fantastic bird. But what you see on YouTube a lot of times is you get a lot of the capabilities and the technical aspects, which is great, and they'll show you some footage of some of the devastation. There is no way that you can watch a video and fully understand the amount of firepower that one Apache helicopter puts out. It's just totally incredible. Incredible. You'd have to be there to actually see it and understand it. But I didn't want to cover that stuff because it's saturated in YouTube with all that information. You can find that easily enough. But I thought I'd share with you some things that maybe you don't know about and maybe they didn't cover in some of these videos. First thing you need to understand is that the AH-64 Apache is designed as a stable firing platform. It's got the Hellfire missile system, which is your tank buster. You got 2.75-inch rockets, and you also have a 30mm chain gun. And so you've got a lot of firepower there. And again, you can watch YouTube videos to find out what those weapon systems are and how they work. But it's important to understand what the platform is used for. It's made to be a stable hover platform to fire these weapon systems, and it does it quite well. Another thing that the Apache has as a characteristic is that it has tandem seating. Now, tandem seating is just front and back. You've got a pilot sitting in the front and a pilot sitting in the back. Typically, what happens is the pilot in the back flies the helicopter and maintains the headings and the navigation, that type stuff, actually flies hands-on, while the front seater on most missions operates the weapon systems because they can do it very accurately. Both seats can operate the weapon system to some extent. The back seat's a bit more limited than the front seat. The front seat usually does weapon systems because they have extra optics and ways to engage more accurately from the front seat. Still, the weapon systems can be fired from the back seat. Also, the person in the back, or the pilot in the back, is typically designated as a pilot in command, but both front and back seat occupants are pilots. And typically what we did was, when we go out and fly, we just split the time about in half as far as pilot and command time, because we track that as co-pilot, pilot, and command. But both are very capable of flying the aircraft, and it can be flown from either seat. But what makes it really interesting, getting to some of the neat stuff here that people don't understand, is just how busy both cockpits are, regardless of what's going on any mission. And if I could just bring somebody in and let them sit in the cockpit like a fly on the wall and watch. As a backseater, I'm busy. I've got 3 radios that I'm listening to and answering. My front seater sharing some of the responsibilities in that aspect, but we have to coordinate that. Sometimes we have to change frequencies on these radios and keep up with that the whole time we're flying, and looking at all the instrumentation inside and making sure everything's flying or working as it should be. So that just gives you some idea of what's going on. The other thing is that people don't understand is that the helmet that is assigned to an Apache pilot is actually custom made for that individual pilot. It is custom fit, and it's made so that you have a monocle called an AH-64. It's an integrated helmet display sighting system that folds down. It's mounted on the helmet, and it folds down in front of the right eye. And that is bore sighted. It's lined up almost like you would bore sight a rifle and adjust the sights. It's made for that individual pilot, and so that helmet stays with that pilot no matter where they go to a new duty station. And it's really incredible the way that works too. There's a lot of symbology on this monocle, the AH-64. It tells you, it gives you some of the information, like how much power you're pulling in, what the heading is, that type of stuff. There's in coordination with the TV screen that's on the dash and the AH-64. I could look and see where my front seater was looking. It had a little cursor, and I could just move my head over and line it up inside the monocle. And if I lined it up on his little dot, I could tell exactly where he's looking. He says, "Hey, I've got a bogey at 2 o'clock low." He said, "I'm looking at it now." So I just line mine up with his, and I'd be looking at the same place he's looking at. But the thing about this AH-64 was that it was slaved, or the cannon actually, or the 30mm chain gun is slaved to this AH-64, so that wherever I turned my head, that's where that gun was pointing. And I could put plus or minus 650 rounds a minute of 30mm on target by pulling the trigger, deactivating the safety and pulling the trigger. So it's pretty amazing in that aspect. So it helped out with the target acquisition in some ways, but the primary focus of the front seater is to use the sophisticated targeting system that they had up there, and that worked quite effectively. We used it in Desert Storm, and it actually performed better than what the specs said it would for a lot of these systems. There were some challenges, however. Something else that we can do with this AH-64 is it allows us to fly in total darkness. You know, there's some night vision goggles out there that use light, limited amounts of light, and amplify them so that you can see what's going on. This actually uses infrared. It's forward-looking infrared, FLIR. We called it FLIR. And when we had this monocle in front of our eye, pitch black, we could still see, because of the contrast of the heat signatures between the vegetation, the pavement, vehicles, that type of stuff, human beings, whatever, we could see that in total darkness from quite a distance away. The front seater had the capability of magnifying it and reaching out there and really getting a close look using the same type system. But we use this as a way to fly in total darkness and a way to engage the targets in total darkness. But getting back to the AH-64 and the FLIR itself, there were some challenges, even though it sounds really neat, and it is, but there are some challenges in using this. When we would fly, you have to understand that at nighttime, we're flying at night, and say we're flying formation, and we've got the AH-64s in front of this eye. this eye is unaided. We're using standard night vision for this eye. So what we have to do is, the symbology that I'm after is mostly in this eye, things I need to know. And when I turn my head, there's a sensor on the front of the helicopter that it's connected to. That's what I'm seeing through. I'm not seeing through this, the eye heads. I'm seeing through a sensor that's on the nose of the helicopter. That sensor is about 10 feet in front of me and about 10 feet below me. So it's like taking this eye and moving it out 10 feet and putting it down about another 3 feet. But the trick was, I needed to, just like every other pilot, you need to come in and check your instruments that are not included in this limited view of your eye heads. Check the instruments and your warning lights and that type of stuff with your naked eye, your unaided eye, and then switch to this eye, mentally switch to this eye. So this is your primary focus. And we got to where we did that mentally. You're looking, literally looking and processing information through this eye. And then when you need to, you just switch back and you use this eye to scan the inside instruments that you need to and get that information. And or looking at the radios, whatever it is you need to do. We try to spend minimal time in the cockpit, looking inside the cockpit. The main focus should be on the outside and maintaining control of the aircraft. So we didn't spend a lot of time inside, but still we had to have that capability of doing that. It was a real challenge in the beginning when you're learning to fly. But something else that, just keeping that in mind, here's another challenge we had. Let's say we're flying formation, okay, just a standard V formation, or not a trail, but a V formation. And let's say I want to take a look out this side to my left and take a look and just get an idea of where this wingman is on the left. Okay, so I look out the left door and I may catch the nose, just the nose of it, just peeking past where my field of view is, so I can pick up on it. And so I can see him with my naked eye, and I may be able to pick him up with this one, but you gotta understand, it's like taking my right eye and moving it 10 feet that way and 3 feet down. And if that's not interesting enough, when you run that sensor in the nose of the aircraft to its limit, either left or right, when you get to that limit, it actually tilts your view. It's not straight up and down. It tilts it slightly. So you have to anticipate that. And so, again, I'm switching back and forth between this eye, which may pick up position lights if they have them on. If we're not on a real mission, we'd have position lights on. And so I'd pick up that with my unaided eye, and then I'd pick up the rest with the aided eye. Sounds pretty interesting, huh? Sounds like a real challenge. Wait till you try this. I turn over to my right, doing the same thing. So I'm trying to pick up the aircraft on this side. So I turn this way. I'm looking naked eye with my left eye. But now my right eye is on the wrong side. It's on that side, 10 feet that way and 3 feet down. And the same thing, when you go over to the max limit, it will tilt the view slightly. So you have to become accustomed to all that, and it takes a lot of training and a lot of practice. It is doable, obviously, or nobody would be doing it, but it's not easy, and not everybody can do it. There are some people that just weren't capable of maintaining that. So as you can see, there's a lot of multitasking involved in the cockpit, and that's just part of it. Another challenge is, if it weren't bad enough, is that when you're using FLIR or infrared, you're depending on the heat signatures, basically, and the contrast between different objects that you're looking at through the FLIR and the IHATs. But twice in a 24-hour period, there's something called an IR infrared crossover. And that's when the temperature of all the things you're looking at, whether it's vegetation, pavement, vehicles, whatever, comes really close to within a few degrees of each other. And when that happens, sometimes it comes close to exceeding the capability of the FLIR. At least it did in the alpha version. And so everything starts running together. There's no clear lines. You can still make it out pretty well, but you have to wait for that crossover to go the other way, and to where things cool off a little more during the night. And then when the sun comes up, you're going the other way, and things have to heat up. And then show a different contrast. So you have those to deal with, and we actually had charts that told us when the IR crossover happened, estimated times, and it depended a lot on the weather. If you had a light, cool mist, drizzle in the air for hours on end, it would accelerate it and bring things down to making them pretty close to the same temperature after a while. So those are a few things that challenges we had to address while we're just operating in just a normal environment, let alone combat. You know, you're still dealing with all this stuff. There's a lot of good things about the Apache as far as the survivability of the Apache. It can take direct hits in the main rotor blades, the tail rotor blades, throughout the fuselage. Even the fuel cells themselves are self-sealing for certain calibers of ammo that might pierce it. And that in itself helped a lot. We had armor plating around the seats. The canopy itself, some people have a misconception that the canopy is bulletproof. It is not. It is plexiglass, and it is tough. It's very tough, but it's not bulletproof. But the seat was very much bulletproof. But we had, when I was in Desert Storm, we had one bird that came back that had a bullet hole right in the center of the mast. It looked like it came right over the pilot's head and pierced the main mast on the Apache for the main rotor blade. And the way it's built is you've got an outside portion of the rotor mast and then an inside portion of the rotor mast. And this, I'm not sure what caliber it was. It was almost big enough to where I could put my index finger through it. But I was told by maintenance later that they'd taken it apart to fix it, obviously. But the bullet was still down in there, and it had scored the inside mast, but it didn't do any damage. Nothing that couldn't be fixed anyway. But they replaced it all, made it good again. But that's just part of the survivability. You also have the crash worthiness portion of it. This aircraft was made to take an impact, especially if you landed wheels down and crashed. The landing gear itself was made to collapse and act as a shock absorber, which is what it is. But it would collapse in a way that would absorb some of the G-forces. In addition to that, the seats that the pilots sit in have special types of almost like shock absorbers, but these struts that hold the seat up, and you can adjust the seat up or down, you know, to reach the controls as you need to. But they're made so that when you do have a hard impact, the seats and the struts also collapse and absorb some of the G-forces there. The chain gun underneath the nose of the helicopter, when it hits a hard impact, it will come up into a well that's made just for that, so it will come up so it doesn't, it absorbs some of the impact also, some of the G-forces. And it works quite well. I'll tell you how well it does work. Many years ago at Fort Rucker, Alabama, where we do the training for helicopter pilots mostly, we had a crew, Apache crew out. They were at a 400-foot hover, and they had a tail rotor failure. For those of you who aren't familiar, the tail rotor is the anti-torque portion of the system that counteracts the torque from the main rotor system. Well, once you lose that, it's not going to be a good day. From 400 feet, they hit the ground. One of them actually survived, which is unbelievable. There was not too many aircraft that could have that type of reputation. So it is a very crash-worthy type of helicopter. Something else that we did was we did hot refueling. And what that is, let's say we're out on a mission, we come into a rearm and it's a forward rearm and refuel pad, and we come in, we'd land, they'd load us up with ammo, and they would move over to where the fuel is, and they'd hook us up, and they'd put in this great big hose, they'd lock it in, put it in, and it would just shove tons of fuel in no time. And then they'd unhook us, and the refueler would give us a thumbs up that we're good. But before they started that process, we would land and go down through a checklist, and we would shut down the engine on the side that they're fueling. We'd leave the other engine running, and that's so we just had to start one engine back up, and we kept all the other systems running so that way we could get out of there quicker when we needed to. and that had its own risk. We did have one event where one Apache was being refueled, and the refueler had the refuel nozzle in there, and it broke loose. And the valve that's supposed to automatically shut off the fuel flow from the hose had broken or had become inoperable, and it just squirted fuel straight up into the rotor system, and the downwash pushed it over into the engine on the other side. They had the engine shut down on the proper side, but the fuel went down through the intake on the engine on the other side and caught the aircraft on fire. The pilot, amazing guy, I know him, just an amazing guy, had the wherewithal to start shutting things down, got on the intercom system, and he says, "Fire, get out, get out, get out." That's a standard, by-the-book emergency procedure for that. And his co-pilot got out, he stayed in and shut down the aircraft, so we wouldn't have parts and pieces flying everywhere if something were to happen. And he cut off the fuel supply to the engine to try to keep it from getting any worse than what it did, but that was to no avail. He was burnt over a considerable portion of his body, but he survived too and got back on flight status. just amazing. So things like that people aren't aware of, you know, the hazards involved and the things you have to do, all the little things you need to know about. Takeoff and landings in Desert Storm. Oh, that was a hoot. We got out there, and it was a new experience for some of us to be in that much sand, loose sand. Wow. And taking off was difficult enough because you got the downwash throwing up the sand. You can't see anything in front of you, so you transition to your symbology on your iHads, and you take off and you get up above it, or you get airspeed so that you're flying away from it. And then when you come back, after a hard day's work of maybe several missions, combat missions, and you're coming back, and you got to make that landing, and you just fly it down to the ground. But about the last 15 feet or so, 15 or 20 feet, all you see is brown with the naked eye. That's it. So you transition to your symbology, and you try to plan it. You just fly. You don't stop and try to hover and ease it down. You just take it and fly it right down to the ground. Watch your symbology. It tells you exactly, at least an estimate of how high you are above the ground, and you just stick it, but you got to keep it level the whole time because you have no outside references. So that too was quite a challenge. And one thing that I do want to mention too, you know, we talk a lot about the capabilities of the aircraft and the pilots that fly it, the Apache, and you know, usually that's where the spotlight is. And I understand that, but something that doesn't often get recognized is the amazing, incredible crew that keeps these aircraft running. The crew chiefs who spend countless hours, who go so long without sleep, and they just work their tails off to make sure that the aircraft run safely and properly and do their job when you need it the most. And I cannot say enough good about those guys. We did have some contractors, great guys too. Matter of fact, most of those, or many of them anyway, were former military maintenance people. But those guys are the unsung heroes for a lot of this, and they just deserve so much credit because these are such complex systems, especially the armament system. But all of it's complex, and it's just not every Tom, Dick, and Harry that can actually do the maintenance on them like they need to do them. So I don't want to drag this out. I just want to give you a few things that I thought were important to share with you, and I'd just like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of the information, and hopefully you'll enjoy it, and maybe you'll get a little more out of it, different perspective than what you see on YouTube. Anyway, wish you all the best, and then thanks a lot.